Democratic rhetoric does in fact have consequences, and no, CNN, no, MSNBC, this time you are not able to blame any of what's happened on Tucker Carlson. I know, that's your number one tactic, isn't it? But no, this time you've got to admit it's kind of your fault, in a sense. Before I go any further, just want to promote this recent premium video that Carl and Callum did talking about legacy media catching dementia, and it is quite relevant to this because obviously one of the big things that's been going around recently is mass shootings motivated by supposed right-wing rhetoric talking points, talking about, the white people will be a minority by this year, where Channel 4 and other such news platforms have forgotten that they've been the ones pushing this the whole time, and the right-wing legacy media has just been reacting to it and pointing out, well, you are trying to replace us, you've said as much, here's all of the evidence, but they like to just brush that aside whenever any of the negative consequences of their rhetoric comes back to bite them. And yet again, here we have another example of that same thing happening, except this time it wasn't some right-wing loony who's trying to cause some damage, it was in fact an avowed leftist. So let's take a look though. So somebody has tried to murder Brett Kavanaugh, one of the Supreme Court justices, who is one of the, I think, 5 or 6 conservative members sat on the Supreme Court in preparation for potential loosening of gun restrictions and as a response as well to the leaked document saying about they were thinking about overturning the Roe v. Wade abortion case, which mandated it so that federal law in every state meant that they have to allow abortion, and states only have the right to determine at what point the cutoff is for when they stop allowing abortion. So, for instance, in Texas, I think at the moment it's 6 or 8 weeks, whereas in some states like Hawaii and Alaska, for instance, you can just get one right up until they're about to be born, which is murder, which just is murder, you know? People can quibble about when it's still in development really early on in the fetal stage. I mean, personally, at this point, I've been radicalized to the point where it's like, I wouldn't allow it at any stage at this point, personally. Once again, the slippery slope is real. Give these people an inch, they will take a mile, and then they will transition your kid if they can't abort it first. So let's take a look here. A California man is facing a charge, no surprise that it's Californian, is facing a charge of attempted murder.
You'd always wanted to be Florida man, wouldn't you?
You would,
just to
but
fill the
Florida man is far too based to do something like this.
Indeed,
Facing a charge of attempted murder after his arrest near the home of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Nicholas John Roski, 26, had planned to murder a Supreme Court justice and was armed with a pistol and a tactical knife, which is what court documents have said. He was taken into custody at about 1 a.m. local time, I think that was yesterday, and protection for the justices has been beefed up ahead of a landmark ruling on US abortion rights. And rightfully so, I would say, because this sort of landmark ruling is the sort of thing that has got leftists in a massive tizzy to the point that they are willing to just go out and stab you and shoot you in some cases. So I think it's absolutely right that they should be beefing up the security. And
well, it's the media, isn't it? It's the media that stirs people up, and people get so agitated about it that they end up going out with weapons to ruin their lives.
People think that if they don't have the right to kill their baby before it's even born, that means that you don't have the right to control your own body, whereas there's some conservative commentators like Matt Walsh, who I agree with on this subject, have said, I'm sorry, it's not your body anymore. It's not just your body when you've got a life form developing in it. That DNA is now a unique sequence of DNA that is forming into a human being. Therefore, you kind of have to apply the same rights that the rest of us outside get to it. And that means you can't just go around murdering them because I don't feel like it, or, oh, I can't afford it, or I didn't know that this was what would happen if I had unprotected sex. That's what sex is for, dumbass. Mr. Roski was spotted by 2 US deputy marshals while getting out of a taxi in front of a Supreme Court justice's home. Carrying a suitcase and backpack, he walked down the street, and soon after, local emergency services took a call from a man who identified himself as Mr. Roski. He said he was having suicidal thoughts, he had a gun, and had come from California to kill a specific United States Supreme Court justice. They then went to the Kavanaugh's home and arrested him. So it's only because this guy seems to have had a brief moment of lucidity.
And he turned himself in.
So thank goodness that did happen. But obviously, I think he is still going to be pressed for the for attempted murder or conspiracy to murder or something along those lines. Kavanaugh and his family were at home at the time of the arrest. So if he had decided to go through with it, it wouldn't have just been Brett himself. It probably would have been his family, his wife, and whatever children that he had also caught in the crossfire. But it's no real surprise to me that baby killers are willing to kill to maintain their rights to kill babies. Once again, repealing this has been said many times, but just in case we do have some poxy leftists watching this episode, watching this video, revoking Roe v. Wade does not mean that you will never be able to get an abortion ever again if you feel like it. It will just mean that the states themselves will have the right to determine it themselves. So in fact, it's actually far more constitutional and far more in keeping with the legacy and ideology that the United States was founded on to repeal a federal ruling and allow it to be made by the states. The whole point of the Constitution was supposed to be anything not expressly permitted by the federal government to the state was something they were not allowed to do and should be left in the independent states' hands. Whereas since maybe the early 1900s, the progressive era, it's actually flipped on its head and turned into anything the Constitution doesn't explicitly say you can't do, well, we can just go ahead with it and do whatever. Yeah. While in custody, he said he was upset about the leaked Supreme Court document on abortion, as well as the recent mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas, according to the affidavit. He said he believed Kavanaugh might issue rulings that would loosen gun control regulations.
So he was sold the canard that the problem with Uvalde is the fact that guns were legal.
Legal in the first place.
Rather than the fact that that's actually happened. The police just stood outside for ages.
Didn't just stand outside for ages, actively detained
set up a cordon preventing parents
who
from
were
getting
trying to go in and save their own kids. Parents who might have had guns on them themselves, perhaps, who, if they had been able to get in, might have been able to stop the killer before he was able to cause any more harm. But this is all hypotheticals, of course, because we live in what actually happened, not what could have happened. In May, a leaked draft decision from the top court in the US suggested it would overturn Roe v. Wade, and last month a group of about 100 people marched from the home of Justice Kavanaugh to Chief Justice John Roberts' home nearby. Both justices are conservative and seen as potentially supportive of curtailing abortion rights. I don't see anything saying anywhere in any theory outside of leftist weirdo theory that you have a right to abortion. Once again, it is a life form that is developing within you. That life form has the same right to life that the rest of us have, as far as I'm considered. And it's very interesting that you see online leftist commentators like Vorsh and Hassan constantly talking about excusing anything done by the left as being preemptive self-defense. They would see this as preemptive self-defense because don't you understand that if you don't allow women to abort their children, you're killing women. You're repealing women's rights. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is repressive tolerance in action. This is the future that... who wrote Repressive Tolerance? I've forgotten his name all of a sudden. Marcuse. Yes, Herbert Marcuse wanted, and this is what it leads to. He says as well, if we go to the next article, that he found Brett Kavanaugh's address online, is what the feds have said. He told the police that he began thinking about how to give his life purpose and decided that he would kill the Supreme Court justice after finding the justice's Montgomery County address on the internet. Photos of Kavanaugh's house were widely shared by the media after pro-choice activists staged demonstrations outside of his and other conservative justices' homes to protest the leaked draft opinion. So this was, in a sense, irresponsible reporting by journalists by making it very obvious and very clear where it is that he lives. Shortly after, Politico reported the leaked draft opinion, the pro-abortion group Ruth Centers posted a map on their website showing the apparent addresses of the 6 conservative justices on the bench: John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Neil Gurish, Amy Coney Barrett, Clarence Thomas, and Brett Kavanaugh himself. Archives of the website posted to the Wayback Machine show. They did take it off. They did remove that content, but the group then wrote on Twitter on Wednesday it wasn't to blame for Roski's alleged plan and said they were committed to non-violence. And the thing is, I can understand if they posted those addresses purely for the sake of go there and protest, go there and do a non-violent protest, but you need to acknowledge...
Even then, a peaceful protesting outside of the House for Supreme Court Justice, isn't that an attempt to manipulate the democratic process?
We'll get to that in a moment. There is that involved in it as well. But I can understand that they may have posted it without the intention for someone to go there and try and murder someone. But you've got to understand when you're posting stuff to the internet, there is a certain responsibility you need to take with that. Fundamentalists, they carry on, will talk non-stop about how our peaceful protests inspired this, rather than the daily mass murders in America. So they're just throwing out some ad homs only fundamentalists think this, and some whataboutisms, which is that what about all of the other mass murder that goes on in America? We can't be held responsible if someone on our side does it purely because of our rhetoric and because we leaked their addresses. We had nothing to do with this, guys. It's only because guns exist. That's the only reason. Please, Daddy Government, step on me. Take away my guns. I don't want to be able to defend myself.
Yeah, the whole sort of anti-gun rights, leftist, anti-fire activism campaign, I just don't understand.
Well, it's a fundamental, I think, what you would expect from the left, which is it's a fundamental attack on property rights themselves, because the right to own a gun is the right to be able to have your own property.
Yeah.
And honestly, most of the rights derive from property rights to begin with.
Yeah, but I think Antifa would be a lot more toothless if it didn't have any weapons.
That's true. That's true, but obviously you can't expect logical consistency from left-wing ideology. I mean, come on. And it even came out that it turns out that the White House did not help themselves because they said, we've not seen any violence. We don't see anything bad coming about here. And they stressed it does not support violence and vandalism at churches and conservative organisations as demonstrations continued. And Jen Psaki added, we know the passion. We understand the passion. We understand the concern. But what the president's position is that it should be peaceful. The protests should be peaceful. This article from Fox News then goes on to say that according to federal US Code 1507, any individual who pickets or parades with the intent of interfering with, obstructing or impeding the administration of justice, or with the intent of influencing any judge, juror, witness or court officer near a US court or near a building or residence occupied or used by such judge, juror, witness or court officer, will be fined or imprisoned not more than 1 year or both.
Unless they're a leftist, presumably.
Unless they're a leftist. And the thing is, I can see actual issues that people might take with a law like this, because you could say that it basically allows the government to do what they want without having to face repercussions from the public.
Yes.
But at the same time here...
Judiciary.
Yeah, from the judiciary. But at the same time, it is just an example of how these laws are administered asymmetrically.
But you could argue that this is actually a greater assault on America's democracy than the Capitol Hill protests. January
Absolutely,
6th.
you could. That was, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not condoning anything that happened on there, that was more of an expression of frustration with the system as it is at the moment. And in fact, I can see in my head Thomas Jefferson, for instance, cheering them all along at the time, if he'd still been around, going, yes, this is what we intended.
Well, the thing is, I think it's very hard to apply specific viewpoints or specific objectives to the Capitol Hill
it was
protests,
such a mishmash of people going in there for their own personal
These
reasons.
guys seem to have a very clear political agenda, which actually makes them much closer to being terrorists if they engage in political violence and intimidation based on those political objectives.
The left has never been known to engage in political violence or intimidation, John. I don't know what you're on about. Meanwhile, outside the nation's capital, an arsonist threw at least one Molotov cocktail into an office of Wisconsin Family Action, a pro-life activist group. The police are investigating the incident as arson and connected it to the aftermath from the leaked draft opinion. Once again, we still don't know who it is who leaked this draft opinion, who could, to a certain extent, be held responsible for all of this, because they are obviously the one who went against the system, leaked this in the first place, but nothing's happened. I don't see anything. Do you know who leaked the draft opinion? Because I don't, even though that should be the number one priority for trying to maintain some kind of standards and some kind of...
it would be really good to know that, wouldn't it? But I'm sure the FBI's got other things to do.
Oh, they've got
like leaking documents, for example. But who knows?
Maybe they might be, I don't know, indoctrinating mentally ill loners online, for instance. But Glenn Greenwald has also commented about this, saying it's vital that we know which cable hosts he likes and which magazines he reads, so we know who radicalized him and is to blame for this. Kind of a little bit jokey, but also quite true to a certain extent. And Jack Posobiec has pointed out that there are a number of Democrats or Democrat sympathizers curating their tweets. He puts, "Hi, Simon Gwynn. Why did you delete this?" Simon Gwynn, interesting real-life trolley problem in America right now. If you had a chance to kill Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, who we definitely didn't leak the addresses of, the two oldest right-wing Supreme Court judges, should you do it while Biden can get his nominees to replace them confirmed? Would this not be a threat of violence to a person of colour? good old Clarence Thomas, but of course we don't apply the same standards. It's interesting as an abstract question, but becomes a real conundrum if, say, you're terminally ill and have little to lose yourself, but know that it could save many women's lives in the future. Now, this
is that not advocating violence?
That is an actual advocation of violence. He has deleted this, but I imagine he's only really deleted this as this has happened, and that Twitter didn't have to step in to do it first, because Jack was able to get a hold of the screenshot, wasn't he? Very, very interesting that he's literally trying to push some mentally ill, terminally ill person who has little to lose to go out and commit violence. Not a good look. Not a good look at all. We've also got morons like professional idiot Billie Eilish becoming a propagandist. This article is just about her mentioning Johnny Depp and Amber Heard in a song, but the actual lyric that she sang, according to the article, performing at the Manchester's AO Arena on Tuesday night, the hitmaker sang, "The internet's gone wild watching movie stars on trial while they're overturning Roe v. Wade." Because she too is not a fan of the current thing. She knows what the current thing is, and she stands against it because that's evil. It's taking away women's rights. But this is all to say, of course, that the usual suspects have grouped around what is the popular thing to be annoyed about nowadays to let everyone know how evil it is that states will have the right to make their own decisions on abortion laws, presumably under the guidance of their own population as well and what they prefer. People have also pointed out, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that the left always unleashes violence, and here's a clip of Chuck Schumer, I believe, saying something that's quite incendiary. Let's play this clip.
They're taking away fundamental rights. I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
I don't mean to laugh, it's just amusing hearing an old man like that trying his best to sound forceful. To add some context, that speech was from March 2020, but it was focused around the discussion of whether Kavanaugh and those would like to repeal Roe v. Wade. And to be fair, Schumer has since said that it didn't come out how I wanted.
Well, it didn't come out how you wanted because he's actually messed up the proverb. The proverb is, "He who sows the wind will reap the whirlwind."
Oh, okay.
And unleashing the whirlwind isn't quite
I didn't know that he was trying to reference a proverb. But, of course, what we all know is that it didn't come out how I wanted is just politician talk for made me look bad. Like I say, it was in reference to abortion rights, though. So it's certainly, this rhetoric has been around for a long time with the Democrats. Yeah. Whenever anyone conservative gets any amount of power in politics, the Democrats immediately start banging on the Roe v. Wade drum. That's what they do. And they try and make the idea that it's the slippery slope from Roe v. Wade to just repealing women's rights altogether. Soon women won't be able to get the right to vote. Joke's on you. I think 99% of people shouldn't have the right to vote. How about that? And if we move along, like I said, the White House had been explicitly endorsing the protests. The quote from here is, Ted Cruz pointed out that Biden White House encouraged a federal crime. It's illegal to protest and picket outside the home. So, you've got politicians within the American political sphere pointing this out, but the White House is just a authority unto itself.
Are they immune to legal action for this kind of statement? Advocating violence. I
don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was one of those. We have investigated ourselves and found ourselves innocent of all charges. But the thing is, I will say that I do not necessarily put all of the blame on the people saying all of this stuff. The blame falls, as somebody who believes in free speech, the blame falls on the person who did this. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who heard all of this stuff and all of this rhetoric and did not go out and kill anybody or attempt to kill anybody. But that's the same logic that I would apply to, for instance, people's gun rights. Yes, one person went out and killed a few people with a gun, but there are millions of people every day who don't do that, who do own guns. So you need to try and be a bit consistent with this. However, I will say that these people have all been very, very irresponsible with their rhetoric, whether I can put the personal
And
blame
using
on
their
them.
own language, they would say this kind of rhetoric is stochastic terrorism.
Well, yes, of course they would, but of course they're not applying their standards to themselves. I do think, once, like you've hinted there, it's interesting that this is all coming from the side that says that saying a trans woman is not a biological woman is violence that could potentially kill them. So it's very interesting how these sorts of standards don't apply on both sides. Just to finish it off, people have been calling for more security. Mitch McConnell has called on Democrats to pass Supreme Court security bill after a man arrested outside of Brett Kavanaugh's home. I think that might have already... I don't know if a bill has passed, but obviously they have beefed up security, and rightfully so, seeing as there are threats to these people's lives. And then someone just repeating the thing that maybe the internal parts of the US system should be doing in the first place, which is maybe we should track down the Supreme Court leaker who put Brett Kavanaugh's life at risk, but we all know that that's not going to happen. Look forward to seeing another non-event, just like all of those people that Ghislaine Maxwell was not trafficking to, for instance. So that's how great the system is right now. Nothing corrupt, nothing to see here. Don't you worry about it and go back to sleep. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast Lotus Eaters, you can become a member and find all of our premium content on lotuseaters.com, including the latest book club number 30 on Dr. G.J. Rainier's The English Are They Human, which was done by Carl and our guest Mega Verma. If you're interested in finding Carl on social media, you can follow him on Getter at Carl Benjamin. Thank you and goodbye.